Welcome. Today we are undertaking a thorough exploration into a case that, well, it really stands as one of the most frustrating and legally complex missing person sagas in New York history.
It's a truly tragic story.
This is the story of Michele Ann Harris, a devoted mother of four who vanished from upstate New York on a night when the entire world was, completely fixed on the national catastrophe of 9/11.
And that date, September 11, 2001, is just absolutely central to understanding the flaws and challenges that plagued this investigation right from the very start.
Yeah.
It casts a long, unavoidable shadow over every effort to find Michele.
Our sources detail not just the disappearance, but a marathon of legal warfare that spanned 15 years. And it involved 4 separate murder trials against her estranged husband, Cal Harris, before he was ultimately acquitted.
4 trials. It's almost unbelievable.
It is. So we are going to analyze this dense web of purely circumstantial evidence, the catastrophic procedural errors that led to 2 major reversals, and the gradual emergence of these highly specific alternative theories of culpability that eventually managed to unravel the prosecution's entire case.
Our mission today is to move beyond the headlines and truly understand how this perfect storm of events, the 9/11 attacks, a bitter, high-stakes financial divorce, and the complete absence of a body transformed a localized missing persons report into an enduring legal puzzle.
Right.
We really need to look closely at what happened and I think why the system took so many bites at the apple before a resolution, however incomplete, was reached for Cal Harris.
And while we dissect all the legal maneuvering and the evidence, we must continually bring it back to the core tragedy. A mother of 4, Michele, she just vanishes, leaving her children without her. The years that followed were defined by a profound and painful fight that tore 2 families apart, and the central, horrifying mystery of her fate, well, it remains unsolved today.
And as you mentioned, we have to start by highlighting the single biggest investigative obstacle here. This occurred the night of 9/11.
Yes.
The New York State Police, who would typically flood an area with resources for a case like this, a missing person under suspicious circumstances.
Sure, they bring in everyone.
Exactly. But they had so many of their specialized units, forensic experts, canine teams, aviation, essential troopers, all diverted to Lower Manhattan immediately following the attacks.
So the local investigators were on their own.
They were. And this resource vacuum in the first, most crucial 72 hours of the investigation created a vulnerability that investigators tried and often failed to overcome for years afterward.
Okay, so let's unpack Michele's life and the intense environment she was operating in leading up to that September night.
It was incredibly volatile.
She was born Michele Ann Taylor in 1965, and she married Cal Harris in 1990. Now, Cal, he came from a very established, wealthy family of car dealership owners in Tioga County.
Right. He was also a former star lacrosse player, so he was a big name in the area.
All right. A local hero, in a way. They settled on this beautiful, sprawling, 252-acre estate outside Spencer, New York, and they had 4 children by 1999. They certainly gave the appearance of living a comfortable, aspirational, upstate dream.
But the sources make it explicitly clear that the marriage was just collapsing internally around 1999, right when Michele was pregnant with their youngest child.
And what was the catalyst?
Well, the main catalyst was Michele discovering Cal was having an affair with a clerk at one of his family's car lots.
Okay.
And what's so telling here is the alleged justification Cal offered her. He claimed she wasn't keeping the house clean enough.
Wow.
Yeah. And while that affair supposedly ended, it was later revealed he had rekindled it, even during a family vacation to Barbados. This really showed a pattern of infidelity combined with a highly dismissive attitude toward Michele.
So the breakdowns wasn't just about infidelity. It sounds like it was hostile.
Very. By October 2000, she had stopped sharing a bed with him, and by early 2001, she officially filed for divorce.
And that's when it really got ugly.
That's when it initiated what became an incredibly acrimonious split, one that Cal was allegedly determined to stop. And the financial motivation for him was overwhelming. The court estimated his net worth at about $5.4 million.
So avoiding a settlement represented a massive financial win for him.
A massive one. When we talk about motive in this case, the financials are paramount. Cal's initial offer was full custody of the children and a settlement of $740,000 spread over 10 years.
Which she rejected.
She rejected it, and she was actively seeking a court-ordered appraisal of his business, a process that would personally cost Cal $30,000 just to conduct, and potentially millions in the final settlement.
And a trial was coming up.
The trial was set for October 22, 2001, just weeks away, so the pressure had really reached its peak.
And the threats surrounding this financial powder keg, they were not subtle. This is so crucial because this became foundational for the prosecution.
Absolutely.
Our sources detail specific pre-disappearance events that were later used to establish his intent. In March of 2001, Michele confided in her sisters that Cal had threatened her.
What did he say?
He allegedly said he wouldn't need a gun to kill her and that the police would never find her body.
The specificity of that about hiding the body is chilling.
It is. It became one of the most damning pieces of circumstantial evidence.
And that threat narrative became even stronger in July, closer to her vanishing, when her hairdresser, Jerome Wilczynski, actually overheard Cal's violent and profane threats over the phone.
So now there's a witness outside the family.
Exactly. The proximity of this second threat, coming just 2 months before her disappearance, was a key factor in the prosecution's decision to pursue murder charges without a body. It injected a terrifying element of volatility into the whole narrative.
Despite all this danger, Michele was actively planning her exit. She was working part-time at Lefty's restaurant in Waverly to earn her own money.
Right, to supplement the, I think it was $400 a month in interim support Cal was ordered to pay. It wasn't much.
No.
And she was moving on personally as well. She had entered a serious relationship with Brian Early, a surveyor, in late 2000. They were planning a future together.
They were going to buy a house.
Yes, in Owego, where the children went to school, and she even had keys to his apartment. However, the defense later highlighted that Early wasn't the only man in her life.
That's right. There was a short relationship with Lefty's manager, Michael Casper.
And she was linked to at least 2 other men, including an employee at Cal's dealership, and, critically, a man from Texas named Stacy Stewart.
We'll be hearing a lot more about him later.
A lot more. The defense later leveraged all these relationships to suggest that any number of people might have had a motive or opportunity.
That context of multiple relationships and an extremely bitter divorce, I mean, it makes for a very volatile environment. But then, just before she disappeared, the tone seemed to shift.
It did. By the weekend after Labor Day, the nanny, Barb Thayer, noted that Michele seemed much happier.
Why was that?
Well, Michele confided in Thayer that she had decided to accept Cal's latest, slightly more generous financial offer.
Okay, so a deal was on the table.
Yes, $80,000 annually in alimony and child support. She felt she was finally securing her future and was scheduled to meet her lawyer on September 12th to finalize the acceptance.
It sounds like she had found her way out.
It certainly seemed that way, but she had one last symbolic act planned. She told Cal she was taking a trip to New York City that coming weekend.
But that wasn't the real reason.
No. She confided in friends that her real goal was to sell or pawn jewelry, including her engagement ring, to raise her half of the down payment for the new house with Brian Early.
So this act of pawning the symbol of her marriage, it signaled her final, definitive break from Cal and the life she was leaving behind.
A very powerful statement.
So let's turn to the last known timeline, September 11, 2001. The day, of course, began with national tragedy. Travel restrictions from the terrorist attacks meant Michele's trip to NYC was, likely canceled. She was delayed for her waitressing shift at Lefty's because of a headache and just the national chaos.
Right. She finally arrived later in the day and worked until 9 p.m. when the restaurant closed early. And she didn't go straight home.
No, she stayed in the parking lot for about an hour, sharing drinks and discussing the day's events with Casper, the manager, and his friend.
Okay.
After that, she drove to Brian Early's apartment in Smithboro. She stayed there for another hour, again sharing drinks, and apparently speaking to Early about how 9/11 had given her some perspective on her own problems.
So when did she leave?
According to Early, she left his apartment sometime between 11 p.m. and 11:30 p.m.
And that is the absolute last time anyone officially reported seeing Michele Ann Harris alive.
So having established this, volatile financial and emotional powder keg the Harrises were sitting on, let's turn to the next morning and see how the investigative failure points began to stack up.
And all hampered severely by the 9/11 fallout.
Severely. The chain of events on September 12th began around 7 a.m. when the nanny, Barb Thayer, arrived to babysit.
And she saw the van.
Yes. Driving up the long quarter-mile driveway, she noticed Michele's gold Ford Windstar minivan parked directly on the road in front of the Harris driveway entrance. And the details of that car discovery are just deeply unsettling.
Very.
The vehicle was parked oddly on the side of the road. It was unlocked, and the keys were still in the ignition.
Thayer drove up the long, curving driveway, which made it impossible to see the road from the house, and she found Cal already dressed for work.
So when she told him the car was down on the road, what was his reaction?
His initial response, as recorded in our sources, was just chillingly detached. He simply said, "We better go get it."
That's it.
That was it. When Thayer speculated that Michele might be injured nearby or disoriented, Cal suggested, despite the car being right there, that she had simply gone to New York City and might have hitchhiked.
That makes no sense. The car is there.
It makes no sense at all. And then he expressed this immediate, overriding desire to get the minivan cleaned and the oil changed, claiming Michele neglected to do it.
Wait, hold on. In the middle of what is clearly a potential missing person situation, his immediate top-of-mind thought is an oil change.
An oil change and a car wash.
Did investigators flag that right away? Or did they just think, maybe this is just how a wealthy, eccentric person acts?
Oh, investigators and Michele's family flagged it instantly. It was seen as highly suspicious behavior, and it later became a central part of the consciousness of guilt argument from the prosecution.
Because it demonstrates a profound lack of concern for her.
A profound lack and an immediate focus on cleaning up evidence or possessions. Cal returned to work after Thayer parked the minivan in the garage. And Thayer, rightly disturbed, she contacted Michele's friend, who then called Michele's divorce lawyer.
And the lawyer called the police.
The lawyer, unable to reach Michele, contacted the state police and reported her missing.
So the state police's initial response, even though it was well-intentioned, was compromised from the start.
Completely. The two investigators who remained in Tioga County went to see Cal at his dealership around 9:40 a.m.
And did he cooperate?
At first, yes. He readily gave them written permission to search the property. He also repeated his request that if they needed the minivan for evidence, they could take it, but he wanted it back quickly so he could address the neglected maintenance.
He's still on the maintenance.
Still on the maintenance. And crucially, Cal tried to shift the focus. He told investigators they should pump the shit out of the people she associated with in Waverly, suggesting she might be involved with cocaine or other illicit activities.
They're trying to point the finger elsewhere.
Immediately. And the police did follow these initial leads. They searched the property extensively, using helicopters and dogs, checking nearby water sources. They interviewed Casper, the lefty's manager, and his friend.
And there were some initial red flags with them, right?
There were. As we noted, suspicion was initially raised. Casper had a history of assault, and his friend had a prior rape conviction in Arizona.
But the sources confirmed that suspicion was, well, it was swiftly negated.
Very swiftly, Casper, Early, and the friend all passed lie detector tests and fully cooperated with the state police. This efficiently cleared them as primary suspects and effectively centered the investigation right back on Cal Harris, given his massive motive and, his very volatile behavior.
And that suspicion hardened 3 days after she vanished, on September 14th.
Right. That's when State Police forensics investigator Joseph Anderson performed a more detailed inspection. Anderson entered the open garage, a place Cal had readily given permission to search.
And what did he find?
It was there he found what appeared to be red blood spatter on the garage wall and more on the doorway leading into the house stains that were still reddish in color.
And this is the moment the case shifted from a missing person report to a potential homicide investigation.
Exactly. Based entirely on circumstantial evidence found 3 days in, Anderson obtained a search warrant based on the spatter. Further investigation uncovered similar stains in the foyer and the kitchen near the garage door.
Was it her blood?
Presumptive tests indicated human blood, and it was later confirmed by DNA to be Michele's or that of an immediate family member.
Okay.
Anderson concluded that additional blood had been present and cleaned up, officially marking the house as a crime scene.
And what was Cal's explanation for that?
Cal's defense, of course, offered a counter-explanation that Michele had cut herself in the garage the month before.
But Anderson and other blood experts, they challenged that.
Strongly. They argued that old, dried blood typically oxidizes to a brownish or black color. The fact that these stains were still reddish strongly suggested recent deposition, closer to the time of the disappearance than a month prior.
And then we see this pattern of behavior from Cal in the immediate aftermath that the prosecution hammered home as demonstrating consciousness of guilt.
Yes. Within weeks, he began dating women openly. On what would have been Michele's 35th birthday, He was seeing a woman he told she could spend the night since Michele wasn't coming home.
And the cleanup efforts.
Key to the narrative. The day after she disappeared, Cal asked an employee to wash his truck, inside and out. He also talked about having a garage sale to sell Michele's clothes and possessions, even offering to split the proceeds with the nanny, Thayer.
Now, the defense later argued that Thayer was the one who suggested the garage sale.
They did, claiming it was after police searches began. But the sequence of actions, cleaning the house, selling her items, and moving on so quickly, was highly incriminating to the family and to investigators who were desperate to find Michele.
And the confrontation over the threats, that really solidified the family's certainty.
Yes. The same day the blood was found, Cal met Michele's sisters for dinner. When confronted about the March threat where he claimed police wouldn't find her body.
And a prior incident from 1996 where Michele had hidden from him with a shotgun in the house.
Right. When confronted with all this, Cal finally admitted to the March threat.
He admitted it.
He did. Though he claimed he hadn't been serious, the sources suggest the admission was uncomfortable and confirmed his volatile capacity to his in-laws. These specific verbalized threats, coupled with the unexplained blood evidence, formed the entire backbone of the case against Cal. So the investigation, it went cold for nearly 4 years after that initial flurry of activity.
4 years is a long time.
It is. And it wasn't until 2005 that the state police secured what they saw as a break. They re-interviewed Michele's hairdresser, Jerome Wilczynski.
The one who overheard the phone call.
Exactly. When first spoken to in 2001, Wilczynski hadn't mentioned overhearing Cal's threats, but 4 years later, he confirmed hearing Cal's violent and profane threats over the phone in July 2001.
And this testimony of a second threat, occurring much closer to the disappearance, was the tipping point.
It was. Mark Lester, the state police captain, later said the case wasn't getting any better, but it had to go to trial. With 2 accounts of violent threats combined with the physical evidence of blood in the house, prosecutors felt they could secure a bodiless murder conviction.
So Cal was indicted.
He was indicted on 1 count of second-degree murder on September 30, 2005, and that's what initiated this legal marathon.
But the beginning of the legal battle was immediately plagued by these deep procedural issues.
Yeah.
This is where the critique of the state's conduct really begins.
Right from the start, Cal's defense attorney, Joseph Cawley, challenged the indictment as legally and factually insufficient. In December 2006, Judge Vincent Squaglia informed both sides that he intended to dismiss the indictment.
And this is where the highly contentious legal maneuvering starts.
It is. Before Squaglia could even sign the dismissal order, the Tioga County District Attorney Gerald Keene filed a motion demanding Squaglia recuse himself, alleging impropriety and favoritism toward the Harris defense team.
So the case was reassigned.
Yes, to a new judge, Bernard E. Smith, in neighboring Broome County. Judge Smith reviewed the transcripts and ruled that the indictment had been defective and had to be dismissed.
So he agreed with the first judge.
He agreed with Squaglia on the substantive points, but he also issued a scathing rebuke to the prosecution, suggesting the recusal motion was designed merely to delay the inevitable dismissal.
And what were the flaws he pointed out?
Well, Smith detailed several flaws in the grand jury process. First, the testimony included excessive, inadmissible evidence speculation about the Harris's marriage, Cal's character, and Michele's personal life that should never have been presented.
And the second point was even more critical.
Far more. A grand juror had asked if Cal had taken a lie detector test after the jury was already told that other witnesses had passed one.
Okay.
And the prosecutor, Keene, responded that there was a story he could tell them about Cal's polygraph status after the KISS presentation was finished.
Implying he failed it.
Exactly. Judge Smith ruled that this comment alone was an error of such profound proportion, essentially implying guilt without evidence, that it required the indictment's dismissal.
So Cal was re-indicted a month later, but this really set the precedent for the procedural dysfunction to come.
It did. The first trial relied entirely on a purely circumstantial case. The prosecution's theory was precise and required perfect timing.
What was the theory?
That Michele died violently at Cal's hands sometime after 11:30 p.m. on September 11th, and that Cal exploited the reduced law enforcement presence caused by 9/11 to dispose of the body within the next 8 hours before dawn.
So the jury heard testimony from Thayer about his detached response, his rush to clean the property.
And Michelle's sisters and hairdresser provided the critical, damning testimony regarding Cal's specific threats to kill her and make her disappear. But the blood evidence was the absolute core of establishing that a murder, not just a disappearance, had taken place.
Right. Joseph Anderson testified about the hundreds of stains he saw, arguing that the reddish color indicated they were recent, not old.
And this was powerfully supported by testimony from Dr. Henry Lee, the nationally renowned blood spatter expert. Lee stated that if the blood was from a month prior, it would have been brown, though he carefully conceded he could not determine the exact age.
And this is where the specific scientific language becomes so vital. Lee testified that the blood stains were consistent with medium-velocity cast-off impact spatter.
And for you, the listener, that is essentially blood thrown off a moving object, like a fist, a hand, or a weapon, during a dynamic, forceful assault.
So it's not from a simple cut.
No, this is a highly specific finding, differentiating the stains from a simple static drip from a cut finger.
Exactly. And Lee elaborated that the stains were located low, no higher than 29 inches above the floor. And there was a blood transfer stain on a throw rug,
Which indicated that something bloody, presumably Michelle's body or an object used in the assault, had been temporarily placed upon it.
This suggested a violent attack, and a subsequent cleanup occurred right there in the garage and foyer area.
The defense fought back vigorously. They highlighted the complete absence of a body or weapon, despite extensive searches, and pointed out Cal's initial cooperation.
They also used the 9/11 context, noting that the first troopers on the scene didn't report smelling chemicals associated with a recent major cleanup effort.
And the defense also put pressure on Dr. Lee, who conceded on cross-examination that he had only based his analysis on photographs, not on an in-person inspection, and that some stains were genuinely old.
The jury deliberated for over a day, and they even asked the judge for clarification on the definition of reasonable doubt.
Which indicates their struggle with the purely circumstantial nature of the evidence.
But ultimately, in June 2007, the trial concluded with a guilty verdict. Cal Harris was convicted of second-degree murder and prepared for sentencing. So the day after that conviction, the entire legal edifice the prosecution had just built, it just began to crumble.
Completely. This is the unexpected twist that blew the case wide open and initiated this long, complicated path toward multiple reversals.
What happened?
The very next morning, a farmhand named Kevin Tubbs came forward. Tubbs saw Michelle's picture in the newspaper covering the verdict and recognized her immediately.
Okay.
He claimed he saw her on the road near the Harris driveway on the morning of September 12, 2001, hours after the prosecution claimed she was already dead.
Hours after?
Yes. Tubbs stated he got up for work around 5:30 a.m. and was driving slowly because he was pulling a hay wagon and his brakes were bad. He placed himself passing the Harris house around 5:45 a.m.
And what did he see?
He said that although the sky was still dim sunrise wasn't until 6:42 a.m., he saw Michele and an unidentified man arguing next to a pickup truck parked on the side of the road.
This testimony completely shatters the prosecution's precise overnight timeline.
Completely. Tubbs' account suggested Michele was alive and involved in an altercation with someone else outside the home at 5:45 a.m., contradicting the entire theory that Cal killed her and disposed of the body before dawn.
So what happened with the verdict?
Based on this genuinely new, potentially outcome-changing evidence, the court granted the defense motion in November 2007 and set aside the guilty verdict.
And then the second surprise witness emerged, though his testimony would become legally problematic.
Right, John Steele. He wrote the court claiming he also drove past around the same time and saw a man and woman arguing next to two vehicles.
And he heard something.
In an affidavit, he claimed he heard the man say, "Just get in the damn car."
But his testimony wasn't allowed. Why?
Well, Steele requested that his name be redacted because he was having an affair at the time and feared public exposure. However, because he tragically died in October 2008, he could not be cross-examined. His testimony was therefore ruled inadmissible hearsay.
A significant setback for the defense.
A huge setback heading into the second trial, but it did further suggest that Tubbs' account was plausible.
So the second trial began in August 2009. The prosecution presented essentially the same circumstantial case.
But this time, the defense introduced Kevin Tubbs, and his testimony, which was corroborated by his parents regarding the timing of his work route that morning, severely complicated the state's neat narrative.
And the prosecution, knowing the threat Tubbs posed, focused intensely on destroying his credibility.
They did. They first questioned his ability to identify Michele from a newspaper photo 4 years later, especially given the dim, pre-dawn light.
But their most aggressive attack was deeply personal.
It was. It focused on a 2006 incident where state police had arrested Tubbs for a minor issue related to non-payment at a gas station, which led to Tubbs suing the state for false arrest.
So the prosecution alleged that Tubbs was motivated to fabricate or embellish his testimony as retaliation against the state police for this previous incident.
Exactly. And we should note that this line of questioning made Tubbs visibly angry and belligerent on the stand, which, as the defense later conceded on appeal, likely damaged his standing with the jurors, regardless of the truth of his testimony.
And the verdict.
Despite the strong challenge Tubbs presented to the timeline, the jury again took over a day to deliberate and once again returned a guilty verdict.
Wow.
Cowell was sentenced to 25 years to life in October 2009.
The subsequent appeals process became a critical lesson in jurisprudence. In 2011, the Third Department Appellate Division upheld the conviction in a divided 3-1 majority.
And the majority found the evidence factually and legally sufficient. They noted the most troubling blood evidence and believed the jury had reasonably dismissed Tubbs' credibility.
But the dissent, written by Justice Bernard T. Malone, Jr., was scathing and proved to be highly influential on New York's highest court.
Very influential. Malone argued that the evidence was just too weak, pointing out that the prosecution's theory required Cal to kill Michele in the middle of the night without waking the 4 children or their large, alert dog.
He also heavily criticized the use of the threat testimony
And the exclusion of Steele's statement. Malone also made these crucial points regarding procedural errors. He noted that the threat testimony, which was supposed to be admitted only to show Cal's reaction when confronted,
his so-called consciousness of guilt.
Right. That it was repeatedly used by the prosecution for its factual content. To prove, Cal said he would kill her and hide the body. And that's a critical distinction that goes to the heart of evidence rules.
Yes, Justice Malone pointed out that the jury instruction given by the trial court failed to make clear that the jury could not consider those statements for their truth.
So the jury was left to believe that Michele's statements to her sisters about the threat were direct proof of the crime, rather than just context for Cal's state of mind.
So to recap this complicated legal odyssey, Cal was convicted twice based on threats, blood evidence, and circumstantial behavior, but both convictions were thrown out.
Thrown out not because the evidence was proven false, but because of severe procedural missteps regarding the jury and the handling of key threat testimony. This sets a very high bar for state prosecutors moving forward.
It's an incredible turn of events.
It is. In 2012, New York's highest court, the Court of Appeals, unanimously reversed the conviction based on those procedural errors. They agreed with Justice Malone on 2 key points.
What were they?
First, the trial court improperly denied a challenge to a juror who admitted her pre-existing opinion about the case would play a slight part. The court ruled that any admission of bias, however slight, requires mandatory further inquiry to ensure the defendant's right to an impartial jury is protected.
And the second point?
Second, the Court of Appeals affirmed that the jury instruction regarding the sisters' testimony about the threats was fundamentally flawed. The danger that the jury accepted Michele's statements about the threats as direct evidence of murder was real, especially in a purely circumstantial case with no body or weapon.
This failure to apprise the jury that the statements were not to be considered for their truth was deemed a highly prejudicial error.
Compounded by the prosecutor's summation, which leaned heavily on those exact statements. This case is a textbook example of how a flawed jury instruction, even when the underlying evidence is compelling, can completely undermine a purely circumstantial case.
So after years of legal wrangling, 2 convictions, and time served, Cal was freed on bail.
And the Court of Appeals strongly recommended a change of venue for the 3rd trial due to the intense media saturation the case had garnered locally.
So the 3rd trial, which started in 2015, marked a significant shift in both location and strategy.
It did. The case was moved 125 miles away to Schoharie County to ensure a less biased jury pool. And the defense, now heavily armed with the Tubbs testimony and the need to deflect focus from Cal, went all in on third-party culpability.
Specifically pointing the finger at Stacey Stewart.
Exactly. The defense effectively introduced the Stewart theory, arguing that the state police suffered from tunnel vision and ignored a viable alternative suspect, a concept they could prove thanks to Tubbs.
And Stewart was the man from Texas, linked to Michele, who was working at a nearby steel plant in 2001.
Right. The evidence against Stewart was compelling, though it was difficult to admit legally. The defense introduced testimony, mostly outside the jury's presence, from a former girlfriend of Stewart's, a Texas parole officer.
And what did she claim?
She claimed that during their relationship, Stewart had allegedly told her he had murdered someone, that he knew exactly how to hide a body, and that he was the last person to see Michele alive.
Wow.
And to complicate matters even more, the sources noted Stewart had ties to the Ku Klux Klan.
And crucially, the key defense witness, Kevin Tubbs, took the stand for the third time and revised his account to be more specific.
That's right. He positively identified a photograph of Stacy Stewart as the man he saw arguing with Michele on the morning of September 12th.
He also described the truck.
He described the parked vehicle as a black or dark blue Chevrolet truck, consistent with what Stewart was known to drive. Tubbs even insisted he remembered the man having large ears.
The prosecution again attacked Tubbs's ability to identify Stewart, arguing that 4 years had passed and the pre-dawn light was too dim.
But the defense now had a concrete figure Stewart to replace the previously unidentified man. Despite the strength of this alternative theory, the jury was unable to reach a unanimous decision in May 2015,
resulting in a hung jury and a mistrial,
which forced the scheduling of an unprecedented fourth murder trial for Cal Harris in 2016.
And at this point, Cal made a critical strategic decision.
He did. He opted for a bench trial, with Justice Richard Mott serving as the sole trier of fact. This eliminated the risk of another hung jury caused by a single dissenting juror and placed his fate entirely in the hands of an experienced jurist.
Someone who would presumably be better equipped to weigh complex circumstantial evidence and legal procedure.
That was the hope.
The prosecution made one final attempt to introduce new, damning evidence in this fourth trial with a new witness, Gregory Farr.
Farr was a convicted murderer who had been incarcerated with Cal. He allegedly heard Cal threaten another prisoner, saying, "I'll make you disappear like I made my wife disappear."
But in a dramatic courtroom turn, Farr suddenly invoked the Fifth Amendment.
He did. He refused to answer more questions, claiming the defense private investigator had contacted his family and coerced him.
The defense strongly rebutted the accusation of witness tampering.
Of course. But Justice Mott ultimately struck Farr's testimony from the record, denying the prosecution its new, potentially most powerful piece of direct evidence.
So the defense then truly solidified its case against Stacy Stewart, turning the focus from Cal's blood evidence to Stewart's suspicious behavior.
They highlighted that Stewart and his friend, David Thomason, had abruptly left the area for Texas shortly after Michele disappeared. Stewart left in such haste he never even made the first mortgage payment on his house in Lockwood.
And the testimony regarding Thomason was highly suggestive, painting a picture of panicked flight.
Yes. Thomason's wife testified that he believes Stewart had killed Michele and buried her in concrete somewhere. Another woman testified that Thomason suspected Stewart might have killed Michele because they were involved in a sexual relationship.
And Thomason himself.
He invoked the Fifth Amendment when called to testify, but his former girlfriend stated Thomason had made admissions that implicated him in the crime, linking both men to the disappearance.
And the physical evidence tying Stewart to the disappearance finally emerged in court.
This was a huge break for the defense. Cal's attorneys eventually located Stewart's truck in Texas, where it had been auctioned off and resold. A forensic search yielded bloodstains on the back seat and door panels, along with earrings similar to ones Cal had bought Michele.
So even though the stains were old and definitive DNA was difficult to obtain, the presence of these items in a vehicle Stewart abandoned right after Michele vanished was extremely compelling.
In a purely circumstantial case, yes, it's very compelling. Furthermore, the defense investigators went to Stewart's former Lockwood house and excavated a burn pit.
And they found things there.
They did. They found fragments that were consistent with Michele's possessions. A piece of a bra strap, swatches of dark blue and beige cloth, and a fancy button. The defense argued these items matched clothing Michele was known to wear around the time of her disappearance.
So this physical evidence, combined with Tubbs' firm identification of Stewart arguing with Michele at 5:45 a.m., it provided Justice Mott with overwhelming reasonable doubt regarding Cal's guilt.
Overwhelming. After a month of testimony and 10 intense days spent considering the complex, often contradictory evidence, Justice Mott delivered his verdict in May 2016.
The result was an acquittal. Cal Harris was found not guilty.
Justice Mott's decision effectively concluded the 15-year legal pursuit against Cal. And Cal's immediate reaction, it really spoke volumes about the immense personal and legal burden he had carried.
What did he say?
He said, "Finally, some calm in my life."
The acquittal was the end of the murder charges. But it was far from the end of Cal Harris's legal troubles.
Not at all. Despite being cleared of murder, he soon found himself back in court, suggesting this ongoing conflict with law enforcement.
That's right. Just 3 weeks after his acquittal, he was arrested for fourth-degree stalking, a misdemeanor.
He allegedly videotaped and threatened the family of one of the state police investigators, in his case, Terry Schultz, outside Schultz's home.
And Cal consistently claimed these charges were direct police retaliation.
Yes, for his acquittal and for his defense team's efforts to expose shortcomings and potential corruption within the state police investigation.
This pattern of behavior continued. He was later found guilty of a harassment charge for threatening a student who mentioned the case in his daughter's college class.
Right, he was fined $100 in order to take anger management classes. Then, at the end of 2017, he was arrested for DWI and leaving the scene of an accident.
And in each instance, he and his legal team maintained that the state police were retaliating against him, that they were unwilling to accept the acquittal.
And this complex, continuing relationship with law enforcement, it remains a battleground in civil court. In 2017, Cal filed a massive federal malicious prosecution lawsuit.
Against who?
Against the state police, Tioga County, the district attorney's office, individual officials, and even the nanny, Barb Thayer.
And what does the suit claim?
It claims negligence and evidence tampering, alleging that the defendants failed to pursue leads against other suspects and actively altered evidence to incriminate him. As of the source material date, this highly significant lawsuit was proceeding.
So he was seeking redress for the decade and a half of legal torment he endured.
Exactly. The defense perspective has also been codified in published works. David Beers, the private investigator hired by Cal, published a book, Reign of Injustice, in 2020.
Arguing Cal's innocence and citing specific evidence of sloppy police work and investigator bias.
And Beers revealed two highly specific, explosive details that fueled the defense's claims of tunnel vision.
What were they?
First, he claimed that Susan Mulvey, the lead state police investigator, allegedly vowed to prove Cal guilty just 2 days after Michelle's disappearance.
Which suggests investigator bias was established well before the blood evidence was even officially discovered.
And Beers even claimed this bias might stem from Cal having previously fired Mulvey's father.
And the second detail?
Beers highlighted a major discrepancy regarding alternative suspects. The state police had released the results of lie detector tests for Early, Casper, and another man, Hakes, all of whom passed and were cleared. But Beers claimed the police conducted a lie detector test on Stacey Stewart and did not release the results to the defense.
This selective transparency, the defense argued, strongly suggested the police were hiding exculpatory evidence that pointed away from Cal.
However, despite the legal resolution, the profound human tragedy endures. Michelle's family remains absolutely convinced of Cal's guilt.
A belief cemented by the threat testimony and the initial blood evidence.
Completely. And conversely, Cal and Michelle's 4 children continue to support their father, which has led to a painful, lasting estrangement from Michelle's side of the family.
And the Spencer estate, where the incident allegedly occurred, it remains unsold. A haunting monument to the unresolved mystery and the family schism.
It's just so sad.
This case, therefore, it represents a unique legal phenomenon, a rare instance of a bodiless murder conviction in New York being reversed repeatedly. The state's focus on the easiest suspect was ultimately derailed because of the new evidence.
The Tubbs sighting and the focus on Stacey Stewart.
Right. It demonstrated that the state had built a house of cards on pure circumstance and had likely ignored other legitimate lines of inquiry.
And the single, critical, unanswered question remains the one introduced by Kevin Tubbs, who was arguing with Michele at 5:45 a.m. on September 12, 2001.
That moment, in the pre-dawn light on a back road, is the key to her disappearance.
And it falls completely outside the successful legal narrative used to convict Cal Harris twice.
This entire saga, it just underscores how challenging it is to prove a bodiless murder beyond a reasonable doubt, especially when procedural errors confuse the evidence trail and competing circumstantial narratives emerge.
We've examined 4 trials, numerous appeals, and a significant shift in the legal focus, all stemming from one night's events that began under the immense shadow of a national catastrophe.
So here is a final thought for you to consider.
Despite Cal Harris's final acquittal and the strong defense arguments pointing towards Stacey Stewart, the core mission of finding Michele Ann Harris's body and resolving the truth of her final hours remains unfulfilled. The legal system closed its chapter, but the human tragedy and the uncertainty it endures for her children and her family.
Thanks for listening.